Daniel Carter had seen many strange things in his travels across the galaxy, but he had never expected to find two starving alien twins in the middle of an unknown planet's forest. His ship had suffered a malfunction, forcing him to crash land on this strange world. With no communication signals reaching his base, he had only one goal: find food, water, and a way to repair his ship. The planet itself was a mix of lush green vegetation and glowing blue rivers, but the air had a faint metallic taste. It was quiet, too quiet. The usual sounds of alien wildlife were missing, making the place feel empty yet strangely eerie. As Daniel walked through the thick forest, he spotted something moving behind the trees. At first, he thought it was a small animal, but when he stepped closer, he froze. Two thin, trembling figures were crouched near a fallen tree, watching him with wide, glowing eyes. They were humanoid in shape but unmistakably alien. Their pale lavender skin shimmered slightly in the dim light, and their hair was silver white, flowing down their backs like silk. Their most striking feature, however, was their eyes. Large, almost too big for their faces, glowing softly like stars in the night. They were young, possibly teenagers by human standards, but malnourished. Their ribs were visible, and their limbs looked fragile, as if they hadn't eaten in days. Daniel immediately lowered his weapon, showing that he meant no harm. "Hey, you two okay?" he asked gently. The twins flinched at the sound of his voice, their long, pointed ears twitching. They clung to each other, whispering in a language Daniel didn't understand. He sighed and slowly reached into his survival pack. Pulling out a protein bar, he unwrapped it and took a bite in front of them, then carefully placed another one on the ground. Their eyes widened in shock. The smaller twin, who seemed slightly more timid, let out a soft, musical hum, nudging the other. The taller one hesitated but eventually crawled forward on shaky limbs and grabbed the food. Daniel watched in fascination as the twins sniffed it before taking a cautious bite. Their expression changed instantly, from hesitation to pure delight. The second twin, seeing the reaction, snatched the remaining food and devoured it. Daniel chuckled. "Guess that means you like it." The twins looked at him with a strange expression, their glowing eyes now filled with something other than fear, curiosity. They spoke to each other in hushed whispers before. To Daniel's surprise, the taller one bowed deeply. The shorter twin followed, mimicking the movement. "Whoa, no need for that," Daniel said, waving his hands. "I just gave you some food. It's not a big deal." But the twins didn't seem to think so. They rushed toward him, suddenly clutching at his jacket like lost children finding the guardian. Their thin fingers gripped his sleeves tightly, and they nuzzled their faces against his arms, letting out soft, purring-like sounds. Daniel stiffened. Okay, that's new." He had met aliens before, but none had ever reacted like this just from being fed. Then it hit him. Maybe food had a deeper meaning in their culture. He cursed under his breath. Had he just accidentally started some kind of alien ritual? "Great," he muttered. "I hope I didn't just marry you two by giving you snacks." The twins didn't understand his words, but they giggled softly, pressing closer as if seeking warmth. Daniel sighed. Whatever he had just done, there was no turning back now. For better or worse, these twins had decided to stay with him, and somehow he had a feeling this was only the beginning of his troubles. Daniel Carter never thought a simple act of kindness would lead to two alien twins following him everywhere like lost puppies, but here he was, trying to figure out what to do with them. The taller twin, who Daniel decided to call Lyri, was the more confident one. She was always the first to react, always watching him closely. The shorter twin, Saria, was shyer, often hiding behind Lyri, but still keeping her glowing eyes fixed on him. Their attachment was becoming a problem. "Look," Daniel sighed, standing near his damaged ship. "I need to fix this thing if I ever want to get off this planet. You two should go back to your people." The twins tilted their heads, completely ignoring his suggestion. Instead, Leary grabbed his hand and nuzzled against his palm, while Saria gently tugged at his sleeve. Daniel groaned. "You're not leaving, are you?" They both let out soft chirping sounds, which Daniel assumed meant no. He sighed. "Fine. But if you're sticking around, you're helping me." The twins didn't understand his words, but when he handed them some metal tools, they seemed fascinated. Saria turned a wrench over in her hands, watching the light reflect off it like it was some kind of magic relic. Leary, on the other hand, tried to bite a screwdriver. Daniel yanked it away. "No, that's not food." Leary blinked at him, then let out a soft purr as if apologizing. Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, you two have no idea how anything works, huh?" It quickly became clear that the twins knew nothing about technology. Whenever he worked on his ship, they just sat nearby, watching in fascination. Sometimes they tried to help, but it mostly ended in more problems than solutions. At one point, Saria handed him a random rock, looking proud. Daniel stared at it. "Oh, thanks." Saria beamed at him, as if she had just given him the greatest gift in the universe. Leary, not to be outdone, tried to hand him a glowing flower she had picked nearby. Daniel sighed but accepted both gifts. Rejecting them might offend them, and the last thing he needed was an alien misunderstanding, a growing connection. Despite the challenges, Daniel had to admit, the twins were surprisingly good company. They didn't speak his language, but they seemed to understand emotions well. Whenever he got frustrated, Leary would gently press her forehead against his shoulder, like a silent way of telling him to take a break. Saria, on the other hand, liked to mimic his movements, as if learning from him. If Daniel drank water, she took a sip from a river. If he stretched, she did the same, her movements clumsy but determined. The twins also stayed close at night, their soft purring sounds helping to break the eerie silence of the alien forest. Daniel realized they were probably scared, abandoned, alone, with no survival skills. That explained why they clung to him. To them, he wasn't just a helper, he was their protector. A dangerous encounter. One evening, as Daniel was setting up a small fire near his crashed ship, Leary suddenly tensed. Her glowing eyes darted toward the darkness of the trees, and her ears twitched. Saria let out a soft, fearful chirp, pressing close to Daniel. "What is it?" he whispered, standing up. Then he heard it, a low, guttural growl. Daniel's hand immediately went to his sidearm. He hadn't seen any predators on this planet yet, but that didn't mean they didn't exist. Suddenly, a large, shadowy creature lunged from the bushes. A reptilian beast, with razor-sharp fangs and glowing yellow eyes. The twins shrieked and clung to him, their tiny hands trembling. Daniel reacted on instinct. He pushed them behind him and fired a shot at the ground in front of the creature. The sudden noise made it pause, but it didn't run. It crouched, ready to strike. "Stay behind me," Daniel ordered, not that the twins understood. Leary and Saria, instead of running, grabbed onto him tighter, as if believing he could protect them from anything. The beast snarled and lunged again, but Daniel had one more trick up his sleeve. He picked up a burning piece of wood from the fire and threw it directly at the creature's face. The flames startled it. The creature let out an angry screech before finally turning and vanishing into the trees. Silence followed. Daniel let out a breath, turning to the twins. "You two okay?" They both looked up at him, eyes wide with awe. Then, to his utter shock, they both threw their arms around him, their bodies trembling. Leary nuzzled against his chest, letting out a deep, content purr, while Saria buried her face into his jacket. Daniel stiffened. Guys, personal space." They didn't let go. If anything, they clung even tighter, as if realizing just how much they needed him. Daniel sighed, patting their heads. Yeah, I get it. I saved you. You're welcome." But deep down, he knew this wasn't just gratitude. This was something much deeper. The twins weren't just following him anymore. They had chosen him, and somehow, Daniel knew his life was never going to be the same again. Daniel Carter was beginning to understand something important. He wasn't just a protector to the alien twins, Leary and Saria. He was everything to them. Ever since he had fed them, they had clung to him like lost children, looking to him for safety, food, and guidance. And after he saved them from the forest predator the night before, their attachment had grown even stronger. Now, as he sat beside the dimly burning fire, trying to fix a damaged circuit from his ship, Leary and Saria cuddled against him, refusing to let go. "This isn't normal," Daniel muttered, looking down at them. "I mean, I get it, you're grateful, but do you really have to sit this close?" The twins chirped softly, their glowing eyes staring up at him with pure admiration. Daniel sighed. "Right, not like you understand me anyway." A strange conversation. Over the past few days, Daniel had started teaching them simple human words. It wasn't easy, but the twins were fast learners. So far, they had picked up on things like food, fire, safe, and Daniel. But today, Leary surprised him. She pointed at herself and said, "Leary." Then she pointed at her sister, Saria. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I know that." Then she poked his chest, looking serious. "Mate." Daniel choked. What?" Leary's ears twitched. She turned to Saria, who nodded as if confirming something. Then they both pointed at him again and repeated, "Mate." Daniel blinked. Did they just? No, that's not what they meant. Right? He shook his head. "Okay, where did you two learn that word?" Leary simply purred, while Saria gently rested her forehead against his shoulder. Daniel rubbed his face. "Great. First, they worship me because I gave them food. Now they're calling me their mate." He knew alien cultures could be weird, but this was a whole new level of awkward. The meaning of food sharing. Trying to get answers, Daniel dug into his backpack and pulled out his holographic dictionary. It was a simple device, just a small tablet that could scan and translate languages with time. He had been using it to record their words, hoping to understand their culture better. He played back the recording of Leary saying "mate," and the device analyzed it. A few seconds later, the translation appeared on the screen. Bonded partner. Chosen protector. One who shares food and life. Daniel stared at the words in horror. Oh, no. He quickly scrolled through more cultural notes that had been gathered from their speech patterns. Then he found something that made his stomach drop. In their culture, sharing food is the first step to forming a lifelong bond. Daniel buried his face in his hands. "Feeding them was a mistake," he muttered. "A huge mistake. An overprotective pair." As if things couldn't get worse, Leary and Saria started acting differently. They became more possessive, constantly staying close to him. If he walked a few steps away, they immediately followed. If he talked to his ship's AI, they pouted like jealous children. But the real trouble started when a scouting drone from a human rescue ship appeared in the sky. Daniel waved at it, relieved. "Finally, I can get off this rock." But before the drone could scan him, Leary and Saria jumped in front of him, hissing and baring their fangs at it. Daniel's relief vanished. Wait. What are you doing?" "That's a rescue drone." The twins ignored him, puffing themselves up like small, angry warriors. And then they attacked it. Saria leaped up, grabbing the drone's side, while Leary threw a rock at it, causing the drone to malfunction and crash into the dirt. Daniel stared in disbelief. "Are you kidding, Inadi?" The twins turned to him, looking proud, as if they had just protected their mate from an enemy. "A difficult choice," Daniel groaned, rubbing his temples. "You two just ruined my only chance at getting off this planet." Leary chirped happily and wrapped her arms around him, as if saying, "Good. Now you stay." Daniel sighed. He was starting to understand their way of thinking. To them, he had fed them, which meant he was their chosen bond. protected them, which meant he was their guardian, stayed with them for days, which meant he was never supposed to leave. And now, they had decided that he belonged to them. Daniel looked at the sky, where the drone's distress signal still flickered. A human rescue team would probably arrive soon. He had to make a choice. Either he left, returning to his normal life, or he stayed, choosing a future with two devoted alien twins who saw him as their mate and protector. He sighed. This was going to be a long day. Daniel Carter sat in the dirt, staring at the destroyed rescue drone, while Leary and Saria purred happily beside him. They had no idea what they had just done. "Great," Daniel muttered, rubbing his face. "Just great." The twins, thinking he was upset because of the enemy drone, nuzzled against him, their glowing eyes full of concern. Saria gently placed her hand on his chest, as if checking his heartbeat, while Leary wrapped her arms around his arm, holding on tightly. Daniel sighed. They really didn't get it. He pointed at the wreckage. "That wasn't a threat. That was my way home." Leary tilted her head. "Home." Saria copied the word softly. "Home." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, home. You know, where I actually live." The twins exchanged glances, then looked at him with soft expressions. "Here," Leary said, pointing to the ground. "Home," Saria added. Daniel's eyes widened. Oh no, they didn't just think he was their protector. They thought he was staying forever. Trying to explain the truth, Daniel stood up and brushed himself off. "All right. You two need to understand something." The twins followed him immediately, their ears twitching as they listened. Daniel took a stick and started drawing in the dirt. First, he drew a small circle. "This is this planet," he said. The twins nodded. Then he drew a much bigger circle far away. "This is Earth, my home." Leary and Saria stared at the drawing, then at him, confusion in their glowing eyes. Daniel sighed and tapped the bigger circle. "I belong here." Then he tapped the smaller circle. "Not here." Saria's ears flattened. "No," she whispered. Leary stomped on the drawing of Earth, smearing it into the dirt. Daniel's mouth fell open. "Did you just?" Leary pouted. "No go." Saria hugged his waist tightly, shaking her head. "No go." Daniel groaned. "You two are impossible." A crash course in alien culture. Realizing that words weren't working, Daniel decided to try a different approach. He grabbed his holographic dictionary again and searched for information on their species' biology and culture. As the data loaded, Daniel read aloud. Species: Scifi, known for strong emotional bonds and telepathic communication between siblings. He glanced at the twins, who were hugging each other while still clinging to him. "Yeah, no kidding," he muttered. He kept reading. Scifi twins are rare and have an instinct to bond with a strong provider. If an outsider gives them food, it is considered a sign of deep commitment. Daniel groaned. Of course it is. The next part shocked him even more. If the bond is not accepted, the twins will suffer severe distress, often leading to an emotional decline. Daniel froze. He looked at the twins, who were happily watching his every move, trusting him completely. He swallowed hard. "Wait, if I leave, it'll actually hurt you." Leary nodded. "Yes." Daniel felt a weight settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just a cultural misunderstanding anymore. This was serious. Finding a middle ground. Daniel sat back down, thinking hard. He couldn't just leave if it would harm them emotionally. But he also couldn't stay forever. "All right," he muttered. "We need a compromise." The twins tilted their heads, waiting for his decision. Daniel took a deep breath. "I can't stay here forever," he said. "But I won't abandon you either." Leary and Saria listened carefully, their glowing eyes full of hope. "I'll find a way to keep in touch," he continued. "And I'll come back. But you need to let me go home first." The twins looked unsure, but they didn't reject the idea outright. Leary's tail flicked. "Promise." Daniel held out his hand. Promise. Saria hesitated, then gently placed her hand over his. Leary followed. For the first time, Daniel saw understanding in their eyes. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to accept the truth. A new mission. With the twins somewhat convinced, Daniel turned back to the wrecked rescue drone. He needed to fix the signal so the rescue team could find him before the twins changed their minds. But as he worked, he couldn't ignore one strange feeling in his chest. A part of him was actually starting to like these two. Their curiosity, their kindness, their loyalty. It was all genuine. Daniel smiled to himself. Maybe going home wasn't just about leaving. Maybe it was about finding a way to bring them along too. Daniel Carter had two goals now: fix the rescue signal and convince the twins that he wasn't abandoning them. The problem: Leary and Saria weren't making things easy. As he crouched beside the damaged drone, trying to repair its communication system, the twins hovered over him, their glowing eyes filled with suspicion. Leary crossed her arms. No go. Daniel sighed. No, I'm not leaving yet. Saria narrowed her eyes. Promise. He exhaled, trying to stay calm. They still didn't fully trust his words. I told you, he said, tapping the drone circuits. I'll come back. The twins looked at each other, communicating silently in their own way. Then, to Daniel's surprise, they both sat beside him and started watching his every move. They were still unsure, but at least they weren't trying to destroy his only chance of getting home again. That was progress. A strange energy in the air. As Daniel worked, he started to notice something odd. The air around them felt heavier, as if a storm was approaching. The trees swayed without wind, and the distant glowing rivers shimmered strangely. Even Leary and Saria seemed different. Their ears twitched, and their tails swayed in an unusual rhythm. Something was coming. Daniel froze when he heard a deep humming noise echoing from the sky. Leary and Saria gasped. They recognized the sound. Before Daniel could react, a large, sleek ship emerged from the clouds, hovering above the forest. His heart raced. Rescue. No, it wasn't human. It was the twins' people. The auxiliary elders arrive. The ship descended smoothly, its metallic surface reflecting the strange light of the alien sky. Daniel took a step back as a group of tall, elegant figures exited the craft. They looked similar to Leary and Saria, but taller and more refined, with elaborate glowing markings on their skin. They moved with grace and authority, their eyes locking onto him instantly. Leary and Saria rushed forward, speaking quickly in their native tongue. Daniel didn't need a translation to know what was happening. The twins were explaining everything. A silent judgment. The elders listened carefully, their glowing eyes shifting between Daniel and the twins. Then one of them, a female with silver tattoos across her forehead, stepped forward. She spoke in a calm, melodic voice. "You fed them," she said in perfect English. Daniel blinked in shock. Yeah." The elder nodded slowly. "You protected them." Daniel scratched the back of his head. "Well, yeah. They needed help." The elder's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "And yet, you plan to leave them." Daniel hesitated. Something about the way she said it made him feel guilty. He exhaled. "I didn't know what feeding them meant. I was just trying to help." The elder studied him for a moment before looking at the twins. "They chose you," she said softly. Leary and Saria nodded eagerly, their glowing eyes full of emotion. The elder sighed. "Then we have a problem." Daniel's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? She turned back to him, expression unreadable. "In our culture, when Scifi twins bond with someone outside their species, it is rare." She paused. "And it is not easily broken." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying I don't have a choice?" The elder tilted her head. "You always have a choice." Leary and Saria stiffened, sensing something was wrong. "But if you leave, The elder continued, "They will suffer." She looked at the twins with gentle eyes. "The bond is already formed. If it is broken, they will feel its absence forever." Daniel's hands curled into fists. He didn't want to hurt them. But could he really stay here forever? The unexpected solution. Just as the weight of the decision settled on him, another elder stepped forward. He was taller, with stripes of blue light running down his arms. "There is another option," he said, his voice deep and commanding. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." The elder turned to Liri and Saria. "If he must leave, then let him take them with him." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Liri and Saria gasped, their tails flicking wildly in excitement. "Wait," Daniel said, holding up a hand. "You're saying I can take them with me?" The elder nodded. "If you truly care for them, then why must you part?" Daniel hesitated. It wasn't that simple. Could the twins even survive in human space? Could they adjust to life among humans? And more importantly, could he handle them constantly clinging to him forever? He looked at Liri and Saria. They were watching him with pure hope, as if this was the only thing that mattered to them. Daniel sighed. Maybe this wasn't just about them. Maybe a part of him didn't want to say goodbye either. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "I'll think about it." The elders nodded. The twins beamed. And for the first time, Daniel realized his journey was far from over. Daniel Carter sat near the wreckage of the rescue drone, staring at the ground, lost in thought. The auxiliary elders had given him a choice: leave the twins behind and break their bond, or take them with him to human space. It should have been an easy decision, but it wasn't. Liri and Saria sat beside him, their glowing eyes full of hope, their tails flicking anxiously as they waited for his answer. They had no doubt in their minds. For them, the decision had already been made. But for Daniel, it was a lot more complicated. A difficult decision. He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, guys, I don't know if this will work." Liri frowned. "Work?" Saria tilted her head. "Go with you." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, space isn't like this planet. It's cold, dangerous, full of rules. You won't have the forest, the glowing rivers, or your people." Liri and Saria exchanged glances, then looked back at him. "You are there," Liri said simply. Daniel sighed. "That's not the point." Saria crawled closer, placing a hand over his chest. "Warm," she murmured. "Safe." Daniel felt a small ache in his heart. To them, he wasn't just a person. He was home. A shocking truth. One of the elders stepped forward. It was the same silver-marked woman who had spoken to him earlier. "You still hesitate," she observed. Daniel nodded. "I don't want to hurt them, but if I take them, they might not fit into human society." The elder studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You misunderstand something, human." Daniel frowned. "What?" She gestured toward the twins. "Liri and Saria are not ordinary." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I figured that out already." The elder shook her head. "No, you do not understand their importance." Daniel tensed. "What do you mean?" The elder took a step closer. "They are genetic rarities, born with abilities and instincts that set them apart from others of our kind." Daniel glanced at Liri and Saria, who looked away shyly, as if they had been keeping a secret. "You mean they're special?" he asked. The elder nodded. "Yes, and that is why their bond with you is so significant. They are not just choosing you as a companion. They are choosing you as their future." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Future. The elder's expression remained calm. "Without a proper bond, they will weaken over time. If you reject them, they will never form another connection. That is the way of our kind." Daniel's eyes widened. "You're saying if I leave, they'll, what? Get sick?" The elder nodded gravely. Liri and Saria lowered their heads, their ears drooping. Daniel's heart pounded. He had assumed this was just emotional attachment, but it was much more than that. If he left them, it wouldn't just hurt their feelings. It would break them. The twins' plea. Lyri finally spoke. Daniel, no leave. Saria nodded. We go. They crawled closer, holding on to him like he was their last hope. Daniel swallowed hard. They had already decided. Even if it meant leaving their home, their people, and everything they knew, they would choose him. Because to them, he was worth more than anything else. Daniel looked at the elders. And you're okay with this? The silver-marked elder sighed. It is not our choice to make. She studied the twins, then looked at him. They have chosen you. The question is, will you accept them? A promise made. Daniel exhaled slowly. He had come to this planet alone, expecting nothing but a survival challenge. But now, he had two alien girls who depended on him, a species watching his every move, and a decision that would change all of their lives. He looked at Lyri and Saria. They trusted him completely. And despite everything, he realized he didn't want to lose them either. Finally, he sighed and gave them a small smile. All right, he said, you're coming with me. Lyri and Saria gasped, their eyes lighting up. They immediately wrapped their arms around him, chirping happily. The elders nodded in approval. And just like that, Daniel's life was no longer just his own. He had a family now. Preparing for departure. As Daniel prepared to leave, the Xilari elders offered supplies, medicine, food, and even a small translator device for the twins. Lyri and Saria touched everything curiously, excited about the idea of traveling with him. Daniel chuckled. You two are gonna have a lot to learn. Lyri grinned. Daniel teach. Saria nodded. We learn. Daniel shook his head but smiled. This was going to be one wild adventure. As he boarded the repaired rescue ship with the twins, he took one last look at the planet. It had given him something unexpected. Not just survival, not just a challenge, but companions who would stay by his side, no matter what. As the ship took off, he felt a sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. The ship's engines roared to life, sending a deep vibration through the metal floor. Daniel Carter sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting on the controls as the ship lifted off from the alien planet's surface. Lyri and Saria sat beside him, their glowing eyes wide with wonder as they watched the world they had always known slowly shrink beneath them. Their tails flicked excitedly, but there was a nervous energy in the air. This was their first time leaving their homeworld. For Daniel, space was normal. But for them, this was a whole new world. The first challenge. As they entered orbit, Daniel checked the ship's navigation system. He had a signal lock on a nearby human station, where he could request passage back to Earth. But before he could plot the course, Lyri poked his arm. Fast? She asked. Daniel smirked. Yeah, space travel is pretty fast. Saria, looking curious, pushed a random button on the console. The ship jerked violently to the left. Whoa! Daniel quickly grabbed the controls, stabilizing the ship before it spun out. He turned to Saria, who looked guilty. Lyri let out a small chirp that almost sounded like laughter. Daniel groaned. Okay, first rule of space travel. No pressing random buttons. Saria lowered her ears. Sorry. Daniel sighed, ruffling her hair. It's okay. Just, let's not crash before we even get anywhere, all right? The twins both nodded eagerly, taking his words very seriously. The first contact with humans. A few hours later, the human station finally appeared on the navigation screen. Daniel activated the communication system. This is Daniel Carter, requesting docking clearance, he said. A crackling voice responded. Carter, we thought you were dead. Daniel chuckled. Nope, just had a little detour. Copy that. You're clear to land. Welcome back. As they approached the station, Lyri and Saria pressed their faces against the window. The The sight of a massive floating structure with blinking lights and ships flying around it was completely new to them. "Big," Leary whispered. Saria grabbed Daniel's sleeve. "Humans? There?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, a lot of them." The twins exchanged nervous glances. Daniel noticed their hesitation and gently placed a hand on their heads. "You'll be fine. I'll be with you." Slowly, they relaxed, trusting him completely. An unexpected welcome. The moment they landed, Daniel stepped off the ship first, taking a deep breath of familiar human air inside the station. It was good to be back. But before he could take another step, a group of officers rushed toward him. "Daniel." One of them, Captain Harris, clapped him on the back. "You survived. What happened out there?" Daniel hesitated, then gestured behind him. Leary and Saria peeked out from the ship, ears twitching as they examined the unfamiliar environment. The officers stared. "Ugh." One of them blinked. "You brought aliens with you." Daniel scratched the back of his head. "Yeah, long story." Leary stepped forward cautiously, while Saria clung to Daniel's side. The humans whispered among themselves, clearly not used to seeing aliens this up close. Daniel sighed. "Look, they're with me, all right. Just treat them like you would anyone else." The captain studied the twins, then shrugged. "Well, as long as they don't cause trouble." Leary grinned. "No trouble." Saria nodded. "Good." The officers stared in shock. "They can talk." Daniel chuckled. "They're fast learners." Leary puffed out her chest proudly. "Smart." The humans couldn't help but smile at that. Just like that, the awkward tension faded, adjusting to a new life. Over the next few days, Leary and Saria began adapting to human life. Everything was new to them. Doors that opened automatically, glowing screens, food that didn't come from trees. At one point, Leary chased a robotic cleaning droid around the station, thinking it was alive. Saria, on the other hand, was fascinated by human food, tasting everything Daniel gave her. Their curiosity never stopped, and Daniel found himself teaching them things constantly. But as much as they were learning, Daniel realized something else. He had changed too. At first, he had seen them as a responsibility. But now, he saw them as family. They weren't just aliens following him around. They were his people now. A promise for the future. One evening, Daniel took Leary and Saria to the observation deck. Through the giant glass window, they could see Earth in the distance, glowing like a blue jewel in space. Leary pointed at it. "Daniel's home." He nodded. "Yeah." Saria tilted her head. "Our home too." Daniel paused. Then he smiled. "Yeah," he said softly. "Our home too." The twins beamed, their tails flicking in happiness. For the first time since meeting them, Daniel felt truly at peace. He didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain. No matter what happened next, they would face it together, as a family.